Coming in at number 3 is, well, the second book is a book that I haven't really spoken much about on this channel because I've only just recently read it, but it is the Letters to the Lost series by Bridget Kemmerer. There are only 2 books in the series, and as of this week, I have now completed this series, which made it eligible, and it definitely had to make my top 5. Coming in at number 3, it is very well deserved. Let's begin with Book 1, Letters to the Lost. So this is a YA contemporary that follows 2 different perspectives. It's a dual perspective, alternating chapters, where, if you don't know what a dual perspective is, in this case it is alternating chapters where we get the perspective of each character that we are following in every second chapter. This dual perspective follows Juliet and Declan. Declan is someone whose job it is to mow the lawns at a cemetery, but in order to do that he needs to move aside personal possessions. One day he comes across a letter that was left on someone's grave, and he not only really loves the letter but can relate to the letter, so he responds. This letter, turns out, is written by Juliet, who, when she finds out that he's read it and responded, is not happy, but eventually they start an anonymous correspondence with each other, and eventually they find out who each other is, but this anonymous correspondence helps them both to deal with very big things that they are going through. Juliet is coming to terms with her mother having died, but also there are some secrets that come to life post her mother's death that she needs to deal with. Meanwhile, Declan has had a very tough life where, I don't want to give away too much, but something happened. There was a series of unfortunate events that occurred for Declan, and unfortunately that has placed him into a certain situation. There we go. And he needs to deal with that. So they both assist each other, and it is really, really well done. Bridget Kemmerer is certainly one of my favorite authors of the year. If you go back and watch that video, she is there, even though I'd only at that time read one of her books. And that is because she writes hard-hitting contemporaries really well. She tackles very tough subjects in her contemporary books, but you can tell she's researched them. She is very raw and real with them, and I just very much appreciated that. Then last week I read the final book in the series, book number 2, More Than We Can Tell. So, as I said, in book 1 we follow Juliet and Declan. In book 2, which has a lot of glare on it, so I do apologise. In book 2, we follow one of Declan's, Declan's best friend, whose name is Rev. So, Rev, when he was younger, was living with his father, who was extremely physically, verbally and mentally abusive to Rev. So Rev eventually ends up in I believe the foster system, but he's not there long, like maybe a day or something, and then he is adopted by an extremely loving couple who turns out they couldn't have had kids, so they adopted him. We didn't know that in this book, but we find out in this one, and we get to really peel back the layers of what Rev went through when he was back at home, even though the timeline with this book continues on from the timeline of book 1. We have moments where Rev will discuss what has happened in his past in great detail, and I really did appreciate that. The other perspective we follow in this book is a completely new character we haven't met. Her name is Emma. Emma is a gamer. She's developed her own game, and everyone's in high school in these books, so the fact that she's a high schooler who's developed her own game and that it's very successful is massive. However, no one really seems to care as far as like her mum or her dad. They don't care, and there is a boy that is playing her game that is, I'm going to just say, in a writing way, very much sexually harassing her, and that's very tough for her to deal with. Eventually Emma meets Rev, and they assist each other through what they are going through. Similar to Letters to the Lost, but not necessarily through letters. They meet and they discuss these things in person. Both books are incredible. My only issue with this one, which I'm going to discuss in my monthly wrap anyway, is that I wish there was more. There's only 2 books in the series, and I could devour 20 books in this series easily because of just how wonderful Bridget Kemmerer is as a writer. Not only is her writing style certainly easy enough to read, but the way she tackles these hard-hitting issues, the way she keeps everything so raw and real, how much of an effect both of these books had on me emotionally. I need more, and yet this is it. She's stopping with 2 books and then for this series, and now she's writing other books in other series. So I don't know if you're watching Bridget Kemmerer, but if you are, can we just write some more of these? Because these were amazing. This is all I've read of hers. I'm definitely going to read more Bridget Kemmerer in 2021, but as a series, as a duology, this was incredible. Coming in at number 2 is The Selection Series by Kiera Cass. Kiera Cass in The Selection Series. What can I say about this series that has just skyrocketed its way to my heart? But I hadn't read this series growing up, and I don't know if I would have when I was younger, because times were different back then. I'm a guy reading books that have women in ball gowns on the cover. Times have changed now, and I'm in a situation where I can go about reading these books, and I am so glad that I can, because this series, if you couldn't already tell from the star rating, this series was just so amazing for me and will always hold a very special place in my heart, as will the author, Kiera Cass, who came in at number 2 on my favourite authors list a little earlier on this month. So let's talk about this series, shall we? This series is a YA dystopian and not a YA romance, as a lot of other people will have you believe. A lot of people on BookTube, when they describe the Selection book or the Selection series, they talk about it as being a bachelor series where we have a number of women who are vying for the heart of the prince, and whoever ends up stealing his heart will become the princess. Yes, technically, this does happen. I would even go as far to say that that is a big part of the book. But it's not the only thing that happens. If it was, it would be a YA romance, or even a YA fantasy maybe. But it's a dystopian. And the reason why this series is a dystopian is because outside of the kingdom and this bachelor situation that we have, the Selection going on, in this world, Ilya, there is a class/caste system that has created a ton of disharmony, discord, and discontent. Everyone is assigned to a class number ranging from 1 to 5, where 1 is the highest of the classes, 5 is the lowest, and in each class you are limited to the type of profession that you do. So if you're class 5, which is where America Singer, our protagonist in this series, is at the beginning of the series, she is only allowed to get work in the arts, so performing or visual art. She can't do anything else. And it's the same with the other classes. They can only do what work within the scope of what their class is allowed to do. Because of not only this limitation, but many others that occur with this class system, there is a ton of warfare that goes on, because the majority of those in the lower classes don't like this, which is completely understandable. And we even have moments where some of them storm the castle and start opening fire. And the reason that I'm saying this to you is because if anyone else is telling you the fluffy version of this book and that it's just a bachelor story, I want you to be prepared that it's not just a bachelor story. And then for those of you who hear it's a bachelor story and think, oh, it's not for me, I want you to know there is action in this series, not just in book 1. In fact, book 1 is probably the My Little Pony of the entire series, but there is still action in this book to do with the class system. Book 2, whoa, there are things that happen in book 2 that make it extremely polarizing. I said when I first reviewed this book, Kiera Cass went there. There were certain things that she chose to do that included violence, I'll just say that much. And because of that, a lot of Selection fans were quite divided over their thoughts on the Elite. I actually personally loved it, but it is rather polarizing because I love that Kiera Cass went there. And it wasn't just pony and sunshine and everything. The one, again, we have a lot of drama that's going on. And I don't mean the needless drama of The Bachelor side of things, because there's that too. I mean the drama from the class system, the dystopian world that we're dealing with. Then we jump into The Heir. Now, the one kind of finishes the selection that we are following. I did not know this. I thought it was 5 books. 5? 5 books that we need to get through to end the selection, but no, this is the original trilogy. The selection ends at the end of book 3. Then we jump ahead a generation to book 4, where we are dealing with the next generation. And the next generation is going through their own selection process. I did not like the fact that we jumped, because the way this book ended, and when I say ended, I mean the last paragraph on the last page, made me so excited to read this book, which took a long time to arrive, because we have 2 characters that are in a room doing something, and I wanted more. And so I was like, okay, can't wait to get this book, because this book's going to give me what I want from this to continue on. But it jumps. It does a time jump, and I didn't like that. So it took me a long time to get over that, 1. And 2, get invested in a whole new bunch of characters that I did not know. But once I did get invested in them, I really enjoyed book 4. And book 5 was so good. When I got to the end of the final chapter, so we have a final chapter and then an epilogue. When I got to the end of the final chapter, I cried twice. Not once, twice. I love Cass as an author. I've gone from calling her Kiara Cass to these days, I just call her Cass because I'm that comfortable with her. I love Cass as an author. I love the decisions that she made. I praise this series so much. These books were not easy for me to get into Australia, particularly with COVID-19 going on and the whole pandemic, but I climbed mountains and I got these books here, and I'm so grateful that I did. I highly recommend this series. Coming in at number 1 is a series of which I'm sure you have no doubt if you've followed my channel throughout the course of this year, and that is the Mistborn series, specifically Mistborn Era 1, otherwise entitled Mistborn the Original Trilogy. All of these books received 5 stars, and they received them for a reason. Let's discuss. Book 1 is titled Mistborn. Okay, I keep meaning to discuss this in a video, and I keep forgetting, and I only end up writing it in editing, but I'm actually going to talk about it now. This book, as you can see, says Mistborn on the cover, but the title of this book is not Mistborn. Mistborn is actually the title of the series, of which so far we have 6 books in this series. So we have the ones that I showed you, plus these 3, 1, 2, 3, but these 3 are Era 2, which I feel differently about compared to Era 1. So, Mistborn is the name of the series. The name of the book is The Final Empire, and I've been surprised for a very long time that it doesn't say... Oh, it does here. Mistborn, The Final Empire. So I've always been surprised that it doesn't say The Final Empire on the cover. So for those of you that were wondering or just calling this Mistborn, it's actually not the correct title. But you can do what I do and call it Mistborn, The Final Empire, which is what I do. So this is book 1. The Well of Ascension is book 2. And the Hero of Ages is book number 3. So let's discuss a little bit about the premise of book 1, trying to keep this as spoiler-free as I can, but I want to go into detail here about this series that I love so much, that is my favorite series of 2020, and, well, anything I've read up until the end of 2020 anyway. So, Mistborn the Final Empire, book 1, opens up with a girl by the name of Vin, who, when the book begins, is part of an all-male thieving crew, where she is the only female member. She is treated horribly because of this. Then, one day, very early on in the book, so it's not a spoiler, she is rescued by a mentor of sorts who takes her under his wing by the name of Kelsia. Kelsia places her onto his crew, which is also male-dominated, but there aren't as many men on his crew, and they actually treat her equally, unlike the former crew that she was a part of. Kelsia one day reveals to Vin that she is a Mistborn, which is a being that has access to certain powers, certain magical abilities. But to have the access to these magical abilities, she needs to ingest certain types of metal. It is a hard magic system, meaning that once you ingest these certain types of metal, depending upon how much you have ingested, is how long that ability is going to last for. Hence, it's a hard magic system. We learn some of the metals and some of the abilities in book 1, and we learn more. These are really heavy as we go along. These are really heavy, especially Well of Ascension. It's surprisingly heavy. I did not start off reading these editions. I read mass market paperback editions, but these are the American version, and I knew that I was going to climb every mountain to get this version because I just think it's so much more beautiful than the other ones, the ones we get in Australia. Anyway, so the other thing you need to know about this book is that this world at the beginning of the story is being lorded over by a man called the Lord Ruler, who is an evil tyrant who has been ruling over this world for 1,000 years because he is immortal. Kelsia and his crew want to defeat the Lord Ruler because he's an awful guy. And part of the reason why he is an awful guy is because there is a class system in this book. It is a fantasy, but a minor category could be dystopian because there are the Scar, basically like slaves. They are treated horribly. And then there are the nobles who are treated like royalty, basically. And Kelsia has lived amongst the Scar. He also has a backstory, but I won't go into that. But at the time of the book, he's lived amongst the Scar, as have a lot of other members on his crew. I think one of them might be a noble, but I could be wrong. One of them at least acts like a noble. For those of you who have read the book, I'm talking about Breeze, who I love, by the way. I feel like Breeze might be a noble, but I don't know. We said about trying to defeat the Lord Ruler, but he's immortal, so how is it going to happen? It is amazing. This whole book, like, okay, let's be fair. This book from chapter 2 onwards had me so drawn in, and then I got to the end and I thought, what else can Brandon Sanderson do? He's written such an amazing story. I don't think he can do anything else. And yet the ending was more than I ever could have expected. So this became my favorite book of the year all the way up until last month. So that's how much staying power this book had. It revolutionized reading for me. It was an amazing story. It has amazing characters. My favorite character of 2020, I'm not doing this as a video, I've gone back and forth on it, but my favorite character of 2020 is Kelsia. Which reminds me, this book took me through a wide range of emotions as well. For those of you who know why, you know why. And we'll leave it at that. Yeah, but I absolutely love this. This book has stayed with me for a long time. It has a taggy in it because this is the last book I'm actually going to read this year because I need to reread this book. Ever since I read it in February, I wanted to reread it right away. And then in March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, and November, there were at least one moment, if not more, where I was thinking, I need to reread The Final Empire. I seriously need to read this book, and now I finally am in a couple of books' time. It's going to be the last book that I read this year. Then we move on to Well of Ascension. Arguably, yes, this book is slower paced, it is more political, but it still follows along the same world building and magic system storyline. We still have Mistborns and Mistings, and we're still ingesting metals and dealing with the magic system. We're learning more about the magic system, but it is slower paced. It is political for reasons that we come to find out at the end of The Final Empire, and yeah, okay. I love this book. And then we move on to the Hero of Ages. This book is arguably the most action-packed out of all of them. They're all action-packed in their own way, but this has a lot more fighting that occurs, like battles that occur. But the ending of this book, and therefore the ending of Mistborn Era 1, oh my goodness, just when I thought Brandon Sanderson could do no more, he just went above and beyond with the way that he finished this series. And one thing that really disappointed me, Mistborn Book 4 is Era 2. I thought Mistborn Book 4 was going to directly follow on from Mistborn Book 3. But there is a time jump of, I think, at least 100, if not 200 years between these two. I need another one of these. I need a book that literally follows on, like the next day, if you will, from the Hero of Ages to see more. I love every book in this series. Oh my gosh. I mean, if books are my children, you never want to have favorite children, but these are my favorite kids. I'm like right here. I was once talking to my mother when I told her I was getting the American version delivered to me from the States. And I said, I love them so much. I don't want any harm to come to them. I want to keep them protected. And she said, you should get one of those cheese platter dome things and put it on the top. And I considered it for this one for a long time. Just some kind of glassware to encase it so that no harm can befall this book. Because these just mean so much to me. Yeah, and I highly recommend it. If you love fantasy, if you love magic systems, I don't know anyone who already loves fantasy and already loves magic systems who has read book 1 who has said they did not like it. It just did so very much for me. So if I may, a very massive thank you to Brandon Sanderson for writing the single best series I have ever read, and my favorite series that I have read throughout my entire life up until the end of 2020s. I will leave that there and let you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. What are your top 5 reads for the year, or top 5 series for the year? Let me know in the comments below. But in the meantime, I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday for now, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thank you so much for watching, and Merry Christmas!